On her birthday, my brother crossed the line. He tried to assault my girlfriend, and now my family thinks I should just forgive him. You won't believe what happened after. I am 27, met my fiancée, F25, almost 7 years ago when we were both studying at college. We met through mutual friends, and about 1 year later we started dating. When she was introduced to my family, everyone was delighted with her, even my mother, who tends to be somewhat reserved with foreigners. My mother and father are migrants, and since they arrived in the country where we live, they have always stayed close to the local community, so they are generally very reserved with anyone who is not from our community. Sounds racist, but not, it is. At this point, I must mention my brother, M29. Before the incident, he was my superhero. I always admired him because he never was intimidated by the local children, and because he always was very protective of me and our sister, F22. Component placement. He always reminded us that we should never look down just because someone tried to annoy us, and that we had as much right to live here as anyone. And when I introduced him to my girlfriend, they became good friends. Time passed, and my girlfriend was quite close to my family, especially my siblings. Given the closeness to my family, it was usual for her to hang out with other of my relatives. She would go shopping with my sister and mother, play billiards with me and my cousins, and was at every party my family organized. It was at one of these parties in which me and my family ended up very drunk, to the point that I ended up sleeping on the floor of my parents' living room. When the party ended, my girlfriend was behaving very weird, and when I asked her what was going on, she told me, "I think your brother tried to kiss me." The surprise that she gave me when hearing those words was so great that any effect of the alcohol disappeared, and I asked her to tell me everything that had happened. She told me that several of the guests went to the roof to drink up there to feel the wind or something like that. Little by little, they all left, until in the end, only she and my brother were left up there. They drank a while more, and while they were talking, she noticed that he was staring at her, and out of nowhere, he bent down trying to kiss her, but she was faster and dodged it. The atmosphere became very uncomfortable after that, and she left there. When she finished telling me what happened, I took her to her house, and later, I talked to my brother and asked him to clarify the whole story. He basically told me the same story, but from his point of view, he apologized and said that he was so drunk that he wasn't thinking, and that he apologized for doing that. Just remembering that conversation makes my blood boil, because at that moment I thought that it had only been a minor incident, something that could be solved with dialogue and establishing some limits. I could never think about what was going to happen next. After what happened at that party, the relationship between my brother and I was uncomfortable. We almost never spoke, and when we did, it was as polite as possible, almost as if we were strangers. The only person who knew what had happened, besides off the three of us, was my younger sister, because on one occasion when she and my girlfriend were talking, she asked if she knew why my brother and I had become distant from what she told her the story. My girlfriend and I decided not to comment on the rest of my family because we didn't want the relationship to fracture further. A few months after that, my family organized a party where they invited a lot of people, friends, family, and people from our community. It was at that party where my girlfriend and my brother met again. At that point, I thought that enough time had passed since the kiss incident and that it could be the first step for things to return to normal. At some point during the party, I lost track of my girlfriend and I started looking for her. I looked for her for a while without seeing her, so I assumed that maybe she was with my sister. But something passed through my head that I decided to look upstairs. While I was going up the stairs, I started to hear strange noises in one of the rooms, and when I opened the door, my brother was pushing my girlfriend against the bed, covering her mouth and trying to put her hand under her dress while she was trying to fight back. I didn't think twice about, and as soon as I saw them, I pounced on my brother and started beating him. My girlfriend left the room as quickly as she could and went downstairs to ask for help. When my father and uncles came up, I was still beating the shit out of my brother. His face was full of blood, as was my knuckles. My father was the one who had to separate us, but I kept insulting him and hitting him. In the end, he was able to separate us, and then he took me out of the room while my uncles checked how bad my brother was. Outside the room, my father asked me what the hell had happened to make me act like that. It took me a while to be able to formulate words, but finally I told him that I had just seen that my brother had tried to abuse my girlfriend, my dad. I know I was in shock for a while. He sat on the floor and put his hand on his forehead and was completely silent for about 10 minutes until my uncles called him because they were going to take my brother to the hospital. After they took my brother, I went to look for my girlfriend and found her talking to my sister about what just had happened. I said goodbye to my sister and we left. All the way to our house, she couldn't stop crying. She was confused, angry, and by the time we got home, she kept crying until she fell asleep. And that was her routine for a couple of days until little by little she could talk again. In those days, my family kept me informed of my condition, brother. I had broken his nose and dislocated his jaw. My mother was the one in denial, incredulous that her son was capable of something like that. But I didn't think much about it because in the end, each person reacts different. And also to a certain point, I understood why my mom was trying to explain my brother's actions. The last thing I heard from him was that after he left the hospital, everyone turned their backs on him for what he did. They fired him from his work and left town. The following weeks, I cut off almost any contact with the outside world and focused on helping my girlfriend. To say the least, she was handling the situation as best she could. She was still very scared about what had happened and had no energy at all. But after almost a month of being home, she had to go to work, but she returned after a few hours because she told me that she couldn't stop feeling threatened, that she was in danger, and that at any moment someone was going to try to do something bad to her. Not every member of my family is thinking to forgive my brother in any way possible. It is the minority of my family that thinks this. I could easily go NC with all of those except for my parents, and also clarifying that my sister is in my side. She is the best friend of my fiance and the only one besides me that knows how much she suffered the first month after the incident. What my brother had been doing this last year, well, when my mom told he contacted her at the beginning of the pandemic, he basically moved to the other side of our country, changed his name, and started taking therapy so one day he could reform. I didn't hear much more, and neither my sister has asked my parents about him, so that's all we know. After my ex stalked me relentlessly, I got a dog for protection. When he broke into my apartment, my dog saved my life by attacking him. You won't believe what happened next. I used to be in this controlling, kind of abusive relationship. When I finally broke it off a year ago, my ex started showing up, trying to get me to take him back. Eventually, it developed into full-on stalking. He would show up at my work and took to just waiting outside of it after he was banned. Leave notes on my car when I was at the grocery store, leave all kinds of flowers outside my house, and then stick angry notes on my door after he saw me throw them in the trash, wrote me all kinds of weird, obsessive emails and letters. I've had to change my phone number 3 times. The behavior escalated over time and got scarier, more threatening. In one instance, he started a small fire in my driveway, but the police couldn't get enough evidence connecting him to it. It was after that instance that I put cameras in my yard. I previously only had them pointing at my doors. I was horrified to learn that the police couldn't do shit about any of this until my stalker actually was caught doing something illegal, like breaking into my house, at which point I might already be dead. I decided I wasn't spending the rest of my life waiting for the other shoe to drop, so I got a handgun and a concealed carry permit, took some self-defense courses, and started doing strength training. I also looked into getting an attack dog, but after all the money I'd sunk into my other methods of protection, they were prohibitively expensive. So I went to my local animal shelter and got the scariest, meanest-looking dog I could find. This is where Thor comes in. He's a 100-pound American bulldog, looks like he'd rip your throat out on sight, but is basically a gigantic teddy bear. He loves every person he's ever met, is incredibly sweet and gentle with my 4-year-old niece, enjoys other animals, and even loves the mailman. I just kind of accepted that he probably wouldn't do anything to protect me from my stalker, but it didn't matter that much because having such a huge dog made me so much more confident. I brought Thor everywhere I could and was working on getting him trained enough to be an emotional support animal, so I could bring him inside places with me. I absolutely would not do this until he was trained well enough to not disrupt a regular service dog. Last month, I woke up in the middle of the night to Thor whining. I was groggy and thought he had to go to the bathroom, so I got out of bed and opened the door. At that point, my house alarm went off, and pretty soon after that, I was face to face with my stalker. I started screaming and went to run for my gun. Before I could do anything, though, Thor ran across the room in full attack mode. The memory is really blurry for me, but there was blood all over my living room, and I remember my stalker was eventually able to escape, at which point Thor chased him outside and then came back to me. When the police showed up, they said Thor was a hero who'd probably saved my life. I don't want to list what they found in my stalker's car after they caught him, but I'm sure he was going to bring me somewhere and kill me. It looks like he's going to prison for a long time, though, so my nightmare is over. Pretty much everyone in my life thinks Thor is a hero, except my SIL. She and my brother have a 4-year-old, the one I mentioned before, and she says she doesn't want Thor around the child anymore. She says since Thor has snapped in the past, he could do it again, so he's not safe to have around kids. We used to see each other a few times a week before she decided Thor was dangerous. The way she words this makes me really angry because Thor didn't snap. He saw a stranger break into his home, heard his owner scream in terror, and reacted to defend me, himself, and his house. Nothing about that screams dangerous around children to me, unless my niece is also going to break into my house and threaten me. This is also a very emotional issue for me because Thor isn't just a dog to me. He's my safe place, my hero, the one who protected me and kept me safe when no one else could. I've also gotten increasingly anxious since this happened, and I can't go anywhere without Thor. I barely leave my house, pay to pick up my groceries from the store instead of going in because I know Thor isn't allowed inside. And all my friends know that if Thor isn't welcome in their house, I'm not coming either, although they're perfectly welcome to come hang out at my house instead. I am really going through it and am working with a therapist to overcome this. Luckily, my office is still fully remote, but I need to be able to go back to work once we're in person again. But I really need my brother and Esil's support. I think my Esil thinks I'm just pouting, and that's why I won't just leave the dog home and come over without him. I don't know how to explain to them that the fear hasn't stopped just because my stalker is in jail. It's actually a lot worse than it was before. I've already suggested they come over and I will take care of Thor, but that wasn't good enough for her. What can I do to make her understand the situation better? So to summarize the impressions, my dog took down my stalker after he broke into my house. Now I have severe anxiety and am too afraid to be without him, but my SIL thinks he's unsafe around my 4YO niece. I don't know how to make them understand that I really am too afraid to go anywhere without him, and not just trying to win an argument. Unfortunately, they blackmailed me and told me that I have to take my son for adoption, otherwise they will never come to me with the child again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but I knew what I had to do. So I said goodbye forever to the tour and took him away. I cried for days. I couldn't come to myself, and I felt hatred towards someone for the first time. Betrayed by my own blood. The day I discovered my girlfriend slept with my brother, I lost everything. I, 25, have been married to my once wonderful wife, 27, for 2 years. We have known each other for 7 years and been together for 5. We had a happy marriage, but it hasn't been without its ups and downs like every other marriage. My brother, 26M, has been living in California since he got into Stanford. After he graduated, he got a job there, and he's been there ever since. He was here for a week for our mom and dad's wedding anniversary and my birthday, which fall 3 days apart. I started feeling something was wrong 2 weeks before he'd arrived. My wife had been on a work trip to LA the week before, and she had told me that she met my brother. I didn't find it weird, as according to her, they just had lunch and had caught up on each other's lives, and then went their separate ways. When she got back, she felt strange. She was distant and keen on arguing over the tiniest of things. For example, me buying a different soap than what she wanted. I apologized and even offered to go and buy her a new bar, but she refused and said that I didn't care about her in the slightest, and that I must have gone at it with 7 women in the 7 days that she was gone. She would smile and laugh while texting someone, and when I tried looking at her phone, wondering what the joke was, she'd scowl at me, calling me a freak who wanted to invade her privacy every chance I got. We were pretty pissed off at each other before the day we left to go to my parents' home. On the car ride there, we agreed to keep a show of happy cheerfulness, as was expected from us by our family. We got there at around 12:30. I had to rush to the airport to pick up my brother as he landed at 1, and my parents' home was 45 minutes away from the airport. He was waiting for me at the gate. We chatted all the way home when the topic of my wife came up. He seemed suddenly a bit down, as if he was overcome with guilt. I sensed something was wrong, so I asked him. He brushed me off, and he remained cheerful the rest of the ride back. Our week went as planned. Me and my wife kept up the pretense of being cheerful while we argued in whispers at night. I knew at this point that she had cheated on me while she was gone, as I have faced that in a relationship before. Little did I know who it was with. The day of my brother's departure arrived. He had to get to the airport an hour early, so we left at around 4:30. 11:30. As we were halfway there, he realized that he needed to talk to me about something. He said it was about my wife. I asked him what it was. He asked me to pull over first, which I did. He told me that during the week that she was in California, they had slept together. So she was texting her all the time. It was because of him that we were having the arguments. I almost punched him in the face, but I didn't. I needed to hear more. I think he saw the red in my eyes, and he said that it was just a mistake. He planned on telling me the moment he got here, but he couldn't. He loved me too much. If he loved me, he wouldn't have done this. I told him to get the fuck out of my car and find himself a cab. He was dead to me. I drove to my best friend's house. I explained everything to him and asked him if I could stay with him for the night. He said yes, and I texted my mom saying, as I won't be there tonight as a friend needed me. I think my brother told my wife that I know, as she's been bombing my phone with texts and calls. Some of the texts read, "Where are you? Swing. Come home, please. I really miss you. I need to talk to you now. Come home." I just turned off my phone.